Thank you all. We have just a little bit of time left, and I didn't want to get us started back at 1 o'clock because honestly, the conversations you are having amongst yourself are probably the most valuable you will have here. But I cannot express my gratitude well enough for all of the help that you have done and all of the great thoughts that you've had in over the course of the past, effectively just 2 days. It's been a rush, and thank you for all of that. I wanted to, in these last few minutes, we went very quickly through that list of ideas, things that need to be thought about as we look forward to the next few years, big questions that no one has been dealing with or we think that need more attention. I'm sure that that's all you were thinking about while you were having lunch and doing things. But does anyone have any new things to add to that? Any new ideas, things that you see potentially or thought about as commonalities across that? I mean, trauma, colonialism, these sorts of issues about how you look at those larger seem to be coherent themes. Obviously, we as a steering committee will be looking at these and what comes out of the other workshops and the themes and ideas and unanswered questions to see how these fit across. But we've got a few minutes here. Oh, Amy has something. Okay. That's the second time I've heard you say that.
Yeah, it comes from a dear departed friend of mine who taught me to play poker.
Okay, perfect.
So all I wanted to say is that when we ended, we used the phrase community of practice, and it didn't make it onto the sheets. And I just want to make sure that phrase is on there, because it's actually a social science phrase, right,
Mm-hmm.
designed around the idea that you bring people together
Yep.
who have expertise that is not necessarily in any way tied to formal education
Right.
or tied to any level of work or position or status and hierarchy, and they're there to solve a problem together. And I just wanted to make sure that phrase get in there, because I think that as we talked a lot this morning about the notion that, right, we all can't do it all, we all
Yep.
don't know it all, so this value in having research teams where some people might be more comfortable talking to policy makers, others might be more comfortable, just doing data set work, that if you can bring these teams together, you can also do something similar in communities, and that is you can bring together members in communities or in cities or villages who themselves may have never spoken to one another. So, things like health workers, educators, and people in the justice system. And you see that around some of these really novel restorative justice processes. So that idea of creating something like a community of practice, I just wanted to throw out, make sure it got on the list, that it could be a very powerful tool that social scientists are particularly poised to be able to create, because we can often see how there could be interlinkages among different sectors in society, and those sectors themselves don't see it.
Yep.
That's all.
So
Thanks.
the way I'd written it down here, and just tell me if this makes sense, I just tried, I think this was when we were looking at gerunds or verbs, I said, one of the things was acknowledging that there is expertise beyond our own areas to create interdisciplinary teams or communities of practice that allow our research to be used and implemented in better new ways. And I'd seen somebody mention the Veterans Administration, having knowledge of PTSDs, health workers, justice practitioners, et cetera.
Sure, yeah.
Is that
I
okay?
just didn't know, because I didn't see it on the sheet. So
Yeah,
that's the only
thank you
reason I
though
said
for
it.
picking up on that, because we got some different areas here. That's great. Any other ideas? In that case, yeah, Embla.
I know that gender has been mentioned a couple of
Not
times.
much.
In fact, 3 times in total, I counted.
Okay.
So I just wanted to put it out there, sort of in the final section of things, that maybe gender issues is something that should always be in the back of our minds, cross-cutting type of thing. In relation to that, and also to just other groups, in terms of access to decision-making processes at higher level positions, and I'm speaking not only about women, but in general groups that have challenges when going through the glass roof type of thing.
Mhm.
So maybe that's something that we can always just keep in mind, because we're not just talking about women, we're talking about indigenous peoples groups and minority groups of different kinds, okay? There is one word that I'm sort of missing from the whole discussion, and maybe I just missed it, and it's been discussed extensively. But just in case, the word innovation is, I feel, is a little bit missing from the discussion. Innovative solutions for communities, innovative solutions for sustainability, innovative solutions for reaching youth and encouraging youth, innovating solutions for methodologies or whatever. So I think maybe just that sort of idea of being open to new ways of doing things. Yeah,
Very good.
thank you.
Yes, Siri.
I want to jump on Amy's idea of community of practice because we are that community. It's very interesting to see the transition from the first report of this kind in 1989, written by 13 very nicely selected, distinguished people, to the next one of 1997, written by 25 people at one meeting or after one meeting, to this group of 5 workshops, which I believe is now of 100-some people.
It's close to 200, including.
Close to
yes.
200. And this is your community of practice that you're looking for, at least the one which is available very easily. So in the way we profess sharing our knowledge and data with communities, I really argue that we have, first and foremost, share the results of these meetings within our community of practice, and not necessarily by go to the Arctic Horizons website, Horizons website, and look at there. The documents, the drafts, the white whatever you produce, papers, can be shared with us. Those of us within the community of practice who keep their interest in reading it will make comments. So make it a process, and it will keep bringing fruits. This interaction with your community of practice. So I think, at least I'm volunteering to be a member of your community of practice. Yeah. I hope there'll be 200 people. So.
Well, like I said, thank you very much to those of you who've gotten back the Scribble documents so far. There's a lot of them showing up, and I'm sure a few more will show up. As I get closer to them, and maybe after I take a couple of days to breathe, I will try and get some of these out to you folks, because I think there may be pieces that have been missed, or pieces that you might be able to fill in some words on those. So that's at least a part of it. Aaron, do you have anything you want to say about the way we're getting things onto the website, even though we were talking about going beyond that and your word clouds and such?
Right. So obviously, going to the website is a start, right? The website isn't just a place where you can find the agenda. There's obviously all the videos. We strip all the text, all the audio is stripped from the video. We then do textual analysis on that, and there's, I think, really nice cluster visualization, and then a nice interactive mechanism for going back through the audio and itself by topic and by those clusters. So in terms of interacting with the proceedings, it's kind of fun and cool. No matter what comes out of in terms of a final synthesis, I think the product is going to be, the product is the process, but the product is also all the elements of it, and we want to make sure that all of this conversation is available for anyone to go back to and draw from, so that they generate their own synthesis documents or whatever, right? And the blog is another really interesting place to engage. I would love to see your white paper, right? And so I think there isn't a one way to start generating the synthesis. Facebook and Twitter are also sort of ways to do sort of shorter tidbits of that. But I think you're absolutely right that we're not, and then on the other end of this, I don't think that, yeah, there's a nice bubble diagram there. I don't think that we're looking at a final document as anything really final, but rather one more step in a conversation. I think another difference than what we're, in terms of previous products is, along this line is, I don't think we're looking at something that will then stand for the next 10 years, right? That's not anywhere close to the aim. It's sort of, if there is a kind of marking point, it's just sort of, here's kind of our take on this year of reflection, right? Among this sort of larger group of people. My guess is that one of the things that we will conclude is that we've discovered all kinds of new ways that we need to consider as we approach reflection going forward, right?
Probably, I would think so, yes.
yeah.
And new reflections.
Just a word of caution that like the humongous iCar project ended up in a set of websites that are very, I won't say maybe not for everybody, but normally hard to use. There are still people who love these things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the 99, and it's still on my shelf. And before going on the plane, I pulled this out and I read it on the plane. So my point is that what is for sure that in 10 years from now, the Facebook and Twitter of today will not be there, and the website as well. This type of product, hopefully, we still will be able to read in 10 years from now.
And there will be a printed product, for sure. The problem with a printed product is it has that kind of fixed finality that I don't like generally, but yeah.
Let's, Anna.
Kevin, I also think what Igor is commenting on, and I think the steering committee has this planned, once you produce a synthesis of this, whatever that product looks like, it will be sent to all the participants and will be posted, you know, and IASA, the International Arctic Social Science Association, will be engaged, and other, you'll see town halls, which I briefly talked about. We're, you know, already trying to engage IASA for the ICAS, which will be in Sweden next year, et cetera, et cetera. So in that sense, it's a living process. But everybody in this room and everybody who has participated and all of our friends and neighbors and researchers will be engaged in commenting on whatever is produced from the synthesis workshop. Yeah, in a variety of ways, however they choose.
But probably even elements that leads towards the synthesis.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we're done with that point, I wanted to raise something different that relates to this point of trauma that has been brought up. And I share the concern that others have voiced here, that in speaking of trauma, similarly to talking about vulnerability, it's a victimization, and it's somewhere where, you know, you need to come in and intervene and help, where I wonder if it's worth thinking, and this hasn't been raised, and I'm sorry it's so late in the process, but thinking around colonization as a disaster, and thinking more broadly in the Arctic of disaster preparedness, disaster response. Is that a more empowering way, maybe, to think of trauma couched within a broader frame of preparing for potential disasters in the Arctic, to do with climate change, to do with oil spills and so on, that can perhaps have an engagement that's more culturally appropriate as well.
Sounds like a perfect topic for a blog post on the on the Arctic Horizons website, so we can get it. I mean, one of the things, and I'm sort of periodically while we're doing this looking at our Twitter feed and our Facebook feed, and inevitably, even though we have 200 people here, and thank you, Igor, for talking about the 13 to 25 to 200, what I'm managing sort of on a daily basis are emails coming through saying, why wasn't I invited, and how come we aren't having open discussions, and, you know, and why are we not talking about community co-production of knowledge? And it's inevitable that there's going to be people who there just wasn't enough money in the world or in Anna's budget to involve everyone in the Arctic in this process. So we do want to make sure that it's clear that when this ends in half an hour, and you all move on, that's not the end. We want to continue to get input from you. We are looking through the blog, we're looking through other media to be able to add into that. So this is a slight piece of it. So please, if you have ideas like that, it is it is sort of late in the day, but not unrelated to everything else we've been talking about, and those are great ideas. Yeah.
I just wanted to add to that, and also a comment on the community of practice idea, both on the same theme. We do, as Peter said, have to be very careful using words like trauma and not imposing trauma on people from the outside. But I think it's important to remember that in the Canadian Arctic, at least in Nunavut, for instance, that this idea of trauma and historical traumas is coming from the community, not coming from us. It's people like Peter Ernick, who
Yeah.
was the first person to come out and say, you know, these residential schools, terrible things happened there, and to start that. So that's coming from the bottom up, not coming from the top down. And that's, I think, one of the key things we have to keep in mind going forward. And also, in terms of this, you know, we are the community of practice, but we're only half of the community of practice, and that's the other half of it,
Right.
that we just need to always engage. We need to be better at engaging and listening to. And
One of the things that I hope we can also think about here is that this community of practice is by nature relatively limited in terms of the number of nations and people who are here. We don't have a lot of Canadians. We don't have any Russians in this group we have had elsewhere. And one of the themes that seems to me has come up over and over again here is that we need to be thinking about the Arctic as we have in the past, not just as the Arctic, but as many Arctics, many Arctic people, many trajectories that lead to things. So as we think about these questions of trauma and differences, those different trajectories and different experiences are going to be important as well. So, yes, Nor.
Well, not to belabor this discussion endlessly, but in the work that I've done in Nunavut, in Clyde River, there's a wonderful community institution focused on health and well-being called Illisaksvik. And they do a lot of work on healing. And for a long time, healing was a big, important term in the community that community members were embracing. And then there was a shift maybe 3 years ago or so when, in talking to people, they said, actually, we're tired of talking about healing, and, now we want to be focusing more on community development. And so I think this sort of goes back to some of the discussions that we've had and sort of cautionary, the need to be cautious about imposing our agendas and using whatever term they may be, whether it's trauma or economic development or what have you. And so I think it just sort of goes back to that piece that we've brought up many times about sort of taking our cues from the communities where we're working in terms of what the priorities are and, the sort of more of an emergent approach.
Fantastic. Any other ideas? Any questions? What have I want to make sure that we have an evaluation for you all to tell us what we got wrong here and what we could do better next time, and I'll never do it again. But I wanted to just think, are there things in the back of your mind that we can at least capture in a short period of time that have not been dealt with here? Things that, you're kind of going, oh my God, why didn't we think about X, Y, or Z, or what could we do in some different way? It might help to inform a follow-up aspect of Arctic Horizons or some other piece. Yeah, Doug? Damn it, I thought we were going to get through this saying that we did everything.
Because I don't think we can, I shouldn't say this anyway because it will open things up and we can just ignore it and put it on the board. But one of the things that came up in a lot of the sessions or in conversations was just training the next generation of researchers. And that includes both the current circumstances of the academy and job opportunities and all of that. It's come up in the sense of, are there centers or there are even departments that are focused on the Arctic? Is that something that we want also? But the idea that, one of the concerns and one of the themes here is just making sure that there is a world of social science that goes on.
Yeah.
And certainly that was something that came up over and over again, that I've heard from a lot of people in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, Michelle.
I just wanted to say that I found this whole experience to be incredibly enriching. And I was wondering, we talk about this community of practice. Is there any way that our community of practice could continue this kind of meeting maybe once every 2 years once every 3 years, sort of almost as a conference format, so that we keep talking to each other and keep exchanging ideas, especially as the Arctic changes, and, you know, sort of to keep sort of up to date on things, and
Yeah.
make sure that our involvement is still, you know, sort of active.
Doug is volunteering.
No, I'm not quite volunteering, but I will, well, actually, I'm not actually, because I'm really inviting everybody to Catherine's house, but, which is just in terms of a potential dovetail. Nean might be a focus for this. There's a Northeast, was it Environmental Archaeology Network? And we meet roughly every other year.
We've met every year.
Every year.
For years, and we're starting to lose focus a little, because
Right.
what holds us together is that we all are interested in environmental archaeology, and that's not going to sustain us for very long. So having another focus and a place to host.
Well, not necessarily another focus inherently, but the idea that, you know, this is a small group but it is this region, more or less, and it probably wouldn't hurt from more people showing up with divergent and different interests that could overlap and sort of be integrated. Sort of, you know, there's lots of
Yeah.
multi-group conference models. But just as saying, there is something out there that we could maybe just graft that onto, at least as a starting point.
Yeah, I've been concerned as you, Doug, with the question of continuity, you know, to what degree not only do we train the next generation of researchers, but through the work that we do in the academy, not just researchers, but the next group of policymakers, the next group of indigenous scholars. And I don't know, my sense is that there are fewer institutions in the lower 48 than there used to be that had a strong interdisciplinary, especially social sciences, focus on the Arctic. I know Brown, for example, was one, and we are now you are more than we will have probably in the next 15 or 20 years here, unless something changes, and there must be other places where we're doing this. But with all of the changes that we see, even if we begin to take climate change to some degree not off the table, but as something that is a big driver behind it, we know the Arctic is changing. And maybe if we are seeing a diminution in the number of institutions that are really focused on getting us into that next generation, I don't think the U.S. is prepared on a policy level or others to meet those challenges in the future. So again, I don't know to what degree NSF or other federal agencies can begin to look at the ways in which we support those sorts of institutions wherever they are, but it seems a critical aspect of what happens. Yeah, go ahead. Everybody here wants to start an institute. Okay.
I just wanted to say, first of all, I'm all for creating a center or something to give students, like Susan and others have been talking about, a place to go and to encourage them to work in the North. I'm also thinking of a more subversive tactic in terms of raising the awareness of the Arctic, is that we don't just publish in Arctic anthropology or just Arctic. We try to submit more things to American antiquity, some of these places that don't have a lot of Arctic content, to try to get this content out into the larger sphere of scholarly articles or scholarly publishing. Maybe try to get a paper in a session, as I'm organizing an Arctic session for Vancouver. But maybe we should be trying to get them in a session about hunter-gatherers or about some of these other issues that isn't just an Arctic focus, instead of talking to each other, trying to reach out into some other venues.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that is something that we should focus on too.
Yeah. Igor.
One of the frustrations I've had is if you start looking down into the K through 12 arena, is where, again, you know, I'm all for, you know, for instance, taking intro to archaeology and anthropology students and sort of putting so many Arctic examples in there that, in fact, you get students interested in the area. But the Arctic Museum in Maine, every elementary school within striking distance of the museum brings kids to the museum. And it's a really important place and time to start educating students about the North, but also in terms of environmentally, but also to start talking to them about diversity of cultures so that they're open to the ideas that we are talking about. And one of the things that has frustrated me is when I look at NSF and look at their education program, talk about a different language. I've just not, you need collaborators to reach in there, but it's also, it's a discipline that could help us in terms of creating the kinds of educational materials or providing them to teachers for those younger kids. And yet it's an area, I mean, I don't even understand a lot of the terminology and methodology. And so, I mean, going towards, they have a lot of money, I gather, or have had, but to me, it's been a big black box that I've not known how to crack the lid on.
Okay, yeah.
You know, I've spent a fair amount of my life reading stuff that people in this room and in other sessions have written, been impressed by it, learned from it, thought about it. But, and this sounds like I'm joking, but I'm not. I'm deadly serious. The question is not how we educate a younger generation, but how we do not educate a younger generation. We've done what we've done. A whole bunch of very smart and very concerned people have done what we've done, and it has limited utility. I want the next generation to figure out how to do it profoundly differently. So the last thing in the world I wanted from my graduate students was to do what I suggested they do, was to do. In other words, we need to figure out how the new generation is going to try and do it differently. And that we haven't begun to move on.
All right. I think we've got time for Igor, and then I want to get some forms out for you all to fill out.
Kevin, this is in response to your unanswered question of what we missed.
Yeah.
What you know, I believe you have to have at least something to report that what we missed. What we missed over those days, and probably at the very beginning, was a short report on the status of the profession. And we spent evenings and mornings in getting anecdotal evidence on where we are, and the outcome is not rosy, to say the least. And unfortunately, we cannot find it anywhere, so how many of us? Where is the largest concentration of Arctic social scientists? Whom we lost over the past 10, 15, 20 years, whom we gained. Because, for example, American anthropologists periodically, or at least used to do this kind of update of how many people. Yeah. We don't need this kind of sterling statistics, you know, our rising numbers, because deeply inside we know that we are a community, if not under threat, but definitely not prospering. And this is something that at the beginning of the meeting, it's not only that we have spent 18 years not updating our major research plan, but we also spent 18 years probably not growing. And these are numbers that we have to have before kind of getting on this discussion, maybe not too late to put in the final report. And it doesn't have to be too long. Maybe Anna has these numbers, you know, how many of us? How do we measure that community through people coming to IASA congresses, you know, 600 paying dues and then disappearing, half of them, or by the number of grants you have at the Arctic Social Science? We don't know the numbers. We don't know we believe the numbers are probably more or less like this. And there are certain segments of the community that have been declining very rapidly, some of them growing. We don't know how and to where. This is, to me, something that is not necessarily the topic of this workshop, but would have been very useful for us to have.
And, you know, it is actually not the subject of this workshop, and we had a very short period of time, but it's really important information, and I agree that would be wonderful to have in the final report, and I'd be encouraging to, if you want to help us with that, that would be good. I mean, you've been around, you know these things, and maybe at least we can work with you as a guideline on that.
Yeah, Igor, if I can, lest Simon leave this room thinking that we are a dying community. And I might say, although I'm not even sure, it would be interesting to know the centers of what institutions are investing in their Arctic programs, and what institutions are investing in Arctic social science, interdisciplinary, what institutions. I can name a few of them, but I don't know them all. But secondly, if you want to use proposal pressure, which I think is a lousy necessarily, not everybody knows about the program, not everybody wants to put in a proposal. Lots of people out there are not putting proposals into my program, but the program pressure for the NSF Arctic Social Sciences program has increased, maybe not tenfold, but darn close from when I took over. And so I'm seeing more dissertation improvement grants. Again, is that just because you all are now encouraging your students, or are we seeing more students in the Arctic? I don't know the answer, so it might be interesting to answer, but I don't see this community, and certainly not the community of practice. The Indigenous scholars community is growing in leaps and bounds, and so I think it's a very vibrant, growing community. I mean, some of us and some of our practices and methodologies are, I mean, we're getting a little long in the tooth, but I think there's new things, new interests being stimulated all the time.
I know there's probably a lot of discussions. We've got 15 minutes. I really need you to fill out some forms, so I'd like the two of you in the back to hand out the evaluation forms. And I just want to repeat and encourage the idea of saying this is the beginning of a conversation, not the end. I won't say a commencement is a beginning, not an end, because we've all heard that. But what I will say while you're doing this is I just wanted to give an extension of thanks once again, especially to the students who've been helping us out here, Kevin Argueta, Alok Bihari, Julia Dang, Bryce Gomez, who unfortunately was stricken down with illness and hasn't been around here because we didn't want to send you all home with whatever he has. Emma Radmilovich and Elaine Staranka, and especially to Emily Button-Kambik, who has been really just an amazing help throughout this entire process. Thank you all.